This happened just a few days ago. It's one of those experiences that sticks in your head, not because it was gory or dramatic, but because something about it just felt wrong, like something you were never supposed to witness. And the scariest part, it wasn't just a story. It happened to us. Every single one of us was sober, alert, and wide awake. We know what we saw. And now I'm going to tell you everything. It was our third night in Goa. The kind of night you think you'll remember for all the right reasons: beaches, music, drinks, friends, and freedom. We had rented scooters and a small hatchback to drive out to a club near Morjim Beach, cruising down the Purnam Agarwada Morjim Road. If you've ever been down that road, you know how strange it can get at night. It's surrounded by woods on both sides, barely any streetlights, and long, winding stretches of emptiness between the occasional shack or roadside shop. It was around 11:15 p.m. The stars were out, but the moon was low, casting weak silver light on the road ahead. We were 5 friends: me, Anya, Rishi, Nitin, and Zoya. I was driving the car, Rishi next to me in the passenger seat, and the other 3 following behind us on 2 scooters. We were playing music low through the Bluetooth speaker, just chatting, vibing, laughing. And then, without warning, Rishi said something that made me turn the volume down. "Did you see that guy?" "What guy?" I asked. There was someone standing on the side of the road back there. Looked like a foreigner. He had his hand up. I think he was trying to hitch a ride. I hadn't seen anything, and I'm usually the one who notices everything on the road: stray dogs, potholes, anything. I asked the others through our WhatsApp call if they saw anyone. No one had. Just Rishi. At first, we joked. Maybe Rishi was seeing things, maybe he just imagined it. But Rishi isn't that kind of guy. He's serious, calm, the kind of person who doesn't scare easily. Still, we drove on. Another 2 or 3 kilometers passed. We reached a bend in the road that turned sharply near a grove of eucalyptus trees. That's when I saw someone. It was sudden, like he'd been waiting for us. A man, standing completely still on the side of the road. He didn't move, not a twitch. Just stood there, facing the road, eyes fixed on us. It was eerie. Something about his stillness felt unnatural, like he wasn't just standing, he was planted there. I tapped Rishi's arm. "That guy. Look." He looked for just a second and then said something that still makes my stomach twist. "That's him. That's the same guy." "No way." "I swear to you," he said, his voice low and tight. "That's the exact same guy I saw earlier." We had driven at a steady pace. No cars had overtaken us. No bikes, no sound of engines behind us, ahead of us. Nothing. There was no possible way this man could have gotten in front of us, unless he ran 3 kilometers through dense woods in pitch black and stood waiting for us on the other side. Even if he had a shortcut, how could he possibly have timed it so perfectly? My gut told me to keep driving, so I did. We reached the club around 11:45 p.m. It was busy, full of life, but I couldn't shake the image of that man. Pale, tall, motionless, dressed in faded jeans and a loose tank top. Something about his eyes didn't sit right with me. They were too wide. We tried to forget about it, danced, drank, laughed. But Rishi wasn't himself, and around 1:30 a.m. he said he wanted to leave early. Zoya agreed. She said she was getting a headache. So we left in 2 groups. Rishi and Zoya took one of the scooters back to our Airbnb. Nitin and Anya wanted to stay a bit longer, so they stuck around. I drove back alone. The road felt even darker on the way back. My headlights barely lit the edges of the forest. I kept glancing at the side of the road, half expecting to see that man again. But I didn't. What I did see, however, was something even worse. About halfway through the route, my headlights flashed on something in the distance. A scooter, fallen on the side of the road. I slowed down instantly. It was Rishi and Zoya's. It was lying on its side, the headlights still on. No sign of them anywhere. I pulled over, my heart pounding. I jumped out and started shouting their names. Nothing. No answer. I picked up the scooter. It wasn't damaged, just lying like someone had carefully placed it down. There was a kind of humming in the air, like electricity or a storm building up, but the sky was clear. Then I heard something behind me, leaves crunching, slow, steady footsteps. I turned, and there he was, the same man, but this time he was closer, much closer. He stood just a few feet away from me on the other side of the road, still, silent, watching. His eyes locked with mine, and I swear on everything I know he smiled. But it wasn't friendly. It wasn't human. It was wide, too wide. He didn't blink. I got back in the car and floored it. I called Rishi. No answer. Called Zoya. Straight to voicemail. I drove like hell back to the Airbnb. When I reached, the front gate was open. The lights inside were on, and I saw both of them sitting on the porch, alive, talking. I slammed the door and ran to them. What the hell happened? They looked confused. What do you mean? Zoya asked. Your scooter. It was on the side of the road. You were gone. I saw that guy again. They exchanged a glance. We never took the scooter, Rishi said slowly. We got a lift from a couple heading back. Zoya felt sick, so we didn't want to risk it. I felt my knees go weak. Then whose scooter did I see? No one said anything. I pulled up my phone, checked the location I dropped the pin when I found the scooter, around 4 kilometers from the club. Rishi frowned. That's the same spot I saw him the first time. That night, we all slept in the same room. None of us wanted to be alone, but even then I had the worst dream of my life. I was driving, alone, on that same road. But this time, the forest was darker, the trees leaning in closer than they should, and every few meters I saw the man. Again and again, standing, watching. I stopped the car, got out, and this time I walked toward him. When I got close, I saw that his eyes weren't eyes at all. They were black holes, just empty sockets that somehow still stared. And when he opened his mouth to speak, the sound that came out wasn't words. It was a scream. High, shrill, inhuman, like something that had never lived in a body. I woke up in a cold sweat, and on my phone, I had a new photo in my gallery, one I didn't take. It was blurry, but you could make out a face, wide eyes, too wide, and a smile that looked like it had been carved into someone who forgot how to be human. We left Goa the next day, and none of us ever spoke of it again. But sometimes, especially when I'm alone, I'll check my phone, and that picture is still there, no matter how many times I delete it. They say Goa is a place of spirits, some friendly, some not, some just lost. But whatever we saw that night on Morjim Road wasn't just a hitchhiker. It wasn't just a man. It was something pretending to be one, and I think it wanted to follow us home. This story is based on real events. It's something that's haunted me for over a decade now. I've never talked about it publicly, but lately the memory's been crawling back into my head at night, and I figured maybe telling it would help me sleep again. Just maybe. It was late summer, probably around 2010. I was 16. That awkward, reckless age where you feel invisible and untouchable, even when you know better. There were 4 of us. Me and my neighbors, Will, Connor, and Kayla. It was a Thursday night, but we had that teenage arrogance that made school feel like an afterthought. We snuck out around midnight, looking to smoke a few joints and feel like badasses. The air was sticky with humidity. A light drizzle had started by the time we lit up under the cover of some massive oaks at the edge of our neighborhood. We didn't tell ghost stories that night. We talked about real monsters, the type that live behind normal-looking doors in normal-looking houses. There was a story we always whispered about, an old case from the 70s. Someone said a girl was taken just a few blocks from where we stood. Rumors about a rape. The man was never caught. Then we veered into darker stuff. Kidnappers, human traffickers, the things you half joke about just to scare each other, even though they leave a pit in your stomach when the laughs fade. It was stupid. We were high, paranoid, and feeding off each other's fear. And then we saw her. We were walking down Oakley Street, long, narrow, and poorly lit. Just a few old street lamps and shadows that swallowed everything else. The trees there bend in unnatural ways like they've been growing around something invisible. That's when we noticed movement across the road. A figure stepping out of a house we didn't even realize was there. The porch light was dead. The door opened silently, and this person, hooded, hunched, just drifted out into the rain. At first, we didn't think anything of it. People walk at night. But then she started following our direction, and then crossed the street. We crossed too, instinctively. And that's when she crossed back. Fast. She stepped under a flickering streetlight, and for the first time, we got a good look. She pulled her hood down, and what we saw didn't match the feeling in our guts. She was beautiful, but not right. Her hair was this deep copper red, soaked and clinging to her face. She looked like she could have been in her late 30s or early 40s, but her skin was flawless like porcelain, almost too perfect for someone walking in the rain at 1 a.m. Her eyes, though, That's what really stuck with me. They were wide, pale, and completely vacant, like something was behind them, but it wasn't her. She smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was mechanical, like a rehearsed gesture. She started asking us questions. Why are you out so late? Where do you live? Do your parents know where you are? Her tone was soft, even playful, but it felt like she was reading from a script, testing the lines, watching how we'd react. She stepped toward me, reached out, and grabbed the front of my shirt. "You're cute," she whispered. "You shouldn't be out here." My heart was hammering in my chest. Something deep and primal inside me screamed that I wasn't safe. I pulled back and snapped. "Don't touch me." She tilted her head like I'd just spoken a language she didn't understand, like she couldn't comprehend why I'd react that way. That's when we noticed the man. He came from the direction we had, middle of the street, walking with purpose, smoking a cigarette, light blue Yankees hat pulled low over his face. Late 20s maybe. He looked pissed. He didn't say anything. He just brushed past us, literally inches from our shoulders. We expected him to do something, say something, but he didn't even look at us. Just kept walking until he reached the woman. Then we heard the first words out of his mouth. "What did she say to you?" We turned. He was facing us now, eyes hard, the cigarette still burning between his fingers. We told him, repeated her questions, said she was probably high or something. He nodded once. "Thanks." Then, without another word, he turned and ran after her. She had started walking away, back toward the house she came from. He grabbed her by the arm and started dragging her. She kicked and screamed. Not words, just sounds, like an animal being pulled into a cage. He got her through the door, slammed it shut, and the porch light flickered on for just a second. Then nothing. We stood there in silence. The rain suddenly felt colder. We didn't say much for the rest of the walk home, but I didn't sleep that night. None of us did. That would have been disturbing enough on its own. But here's where it gets weirder. The next day, we started realizing some of our stuff was missing. Weed, a lighter, a pipe. Nothing big, nothing worth calling the cops about, but all of it vanished at some point that night. We tried to piece together the timeline, and the weird thing was, we think it was gone before we even ran into the woman. Connor kept saying she was a witch, that she somehow lured us there so the man could rob us or drug us or worse. He was convinced the whole thing was a setup, like some kind of sick hunt. The way she grabbed me, the way he appeared right after, the way he dragged her back into the house like she wasn't a person at all. We never saw either of them again. Weeks later, I walked by that house in the daytime. It looked dead. Curtains drawn, no car in the driveway, overgrown grass, like no one had lived there in years. I even knocked once. No answer. I still live in the same town. I've walked that street 100 times since then, but I've never seen anyone go in or come out. I don't even know if the lights work anymore. I asked my mom once who used to live there, and she got real quiet. She said, "That house, nobody's lived there since the woman who died there in the 90s. I've tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were squatters. Maybe the woman was mentally ill and he was trying to help her. Maybe we just stumbled into something we weren't meant to see. But none of that explains the way she looked at me. Like she knew me. Like she wanted something. None of that explains the missing stuff. Or the way the porch light flickered on for just a second, right when the door slammed. Like the house itself was watching. If you're still listening, let me leave you with this. There are houses in your neighborhood that look like every other house. Same lawn, same windows, same stories. But some of them are empty for a reason. Some doors lead to places you aren't meant to go. And if someone ever asks you where you live, maybe don't answer, because they might already know. About 7 years ago, I got an unexpected phone call from someone claiming to be my cousin. His name was Travis. I had never seen him in my life, not even as a kid. The only time I had heard of him was through vague family stories and a few pictures in my mother's old albums. He said he was having a small family dinner at his house out in the countryside and that he wanted me to come. I remember thinking it was strange. Random, even. Why now? Why, after all these years, was he suddenly reaching out? But he spoke with warmth like we'd known each other forever, and I figured maybe he just wanted to reconnect. Maybe it was time to meet a part of my family I never knew. The invitation had an address I didn't recognize. I typed it into my GPS, but nothing came up. No results. Just a red dot floating in a sea of green. That should have been the first red flag. But instead of calling it off, I used an old physical map I had in my glove compartment. I pinpointed the rough area and decided to navigate myself the old-fashioned way. The drive started off normal. I left the city around 2 p.m. expecting to get there by 4. But as the minutes turned into hours, the surroundings changed drastically. The paved roads turned to gravel and eventually to dirt. The scenery became an endless sprawl of woods and neglected farmland. Trees closed in on either side of the road, casting long shadows that made everything feel watched. At one point, I literally muttered, "Where the fuck am I going?" to myself. Eventually, I came upon a mailbox with faded numbers that somewhat matched the address Travis gave me. Down a barely visible path, I saw a house nestled in the overgrowth. It was old, 2 stories, and completely choked by vines and overhanging branches. It didn't look abandoned, but it didn't look alive either. It had this heavy, suffocating stillness to it. "This can't be it," I whispered. But as soon as I pulled into the rocky driveway, 2 people stepped out onto the porch. A man and a woman, middle-aged, my aunt and uncle. They waved enthusiastically, almost too eagerly, like they'd been watching and waiting. I didn't recognize either of them, but they seemed kind, welcoming. The woman even teared up a little as she hugged me and said how much I resembled my mother. That gave me pause, but I went inside anyway. The interior of the house was like stepping into another time. It smelled faintly of wood polish and old fabric. Antique furniture sat against the walls, dust floated in the streams of late sunlight filtering through the curtains. Still, it was oddly comforting. Homey, even. I asked where Travis was. "Oh, he just ran out for a bit," my uncle said quickly. "Should be back any time now." We ended up talking for hours. They asked about my life, my job, my friends, and more than anything, they asked about my mother. They asked about her in such specific detail, like they knew her more intimately than I'd ever heard anyone in the family talk about her. They brought out old stories I had never heard before, with names and dates that seemed a little too accurate. My aunt eventually served dinner, homemade pot roast with mashed potatoes and roasted carrots. It was actually delicious, and I wolfed it down. Afterward, we played a few rounds of Uno at the kitchen table, and for a moment I felt at ease. They were fun, competitive, laughing. The house felt normal again. But the entire time I kept glancing at the clock. It was almost 7 p.m., then 8, then 9, and still no sign of Travis. "Hey," I finally asked, trying to sound casual, "are you sure he's coming back?" "Oh, he'll be here. You just missed him," they said almost in unison. Something about the way they both said it, it was like they'd rehearsed it. By 9:30, I told them I had to get going. I had work in the morning and didn't want to be driving through the woods in the dark. The GPS was still a joke. No signal, no maps, nothing. They exchanged glances. My uncle looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I really think you should stay the night. It's too dark out there, too easy to get lost." "Yeah," my aunt chimed in. "It's better if you leave in the morning. Trust us." I smiled and shook my head. "I'll be fine. I grew up hiking. I can navigate the Sahara if I have to." But they didn't laugh. They looked agitated, not concerned. Agitated. "We insist," my uncle said, standing up now. "You can take Travis's old room. We'll set it up for you." That's when something clicked. The friendly tone was gone. Any us, the warmth in their eyes had vanished. There was this quiet, heavy air in the room, and it was suddenly very clear to me. I was not supposed to leave. So when they left the room to get the sheets, I bolted. Quiet as I could, I slipped out the front door, jogged down the driveway, and got in my car. My hands were shaking as I turned the key, half expecting them to come running after me. But they didn't. They never even came out. I drove like hell through the dark. Trees blurred past. I took turn after turn until, by some miracle, I recognized a gas station I had passed earlier. I made it home about an hour later than I expected. It was nearly 11. I parked quietly, climbed the fence, and entered through the back door so I wouldn't wake my parents. But the kitchen lights were on, and there, sitting at the table, was my mom, looking furious. "Where have you been?" she asked. I was confused. "I told you, I was at Aunt Deborah's. Travis invited me for dinner." Her face turned pale. Deborah called earlier. She said you never showed up. That moment still haunts me. I couldn't speak. I just stood there. My skin went cold, and the room suddenly felt too quiet. Who did I just have dinner with? A week passed. I couldn't shake the memory. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that house, swallowed by trees, that pot roast, their fake smiles. I decided to investigate. I called my mom while she was at work and casually asked her about Travis. She was quiet for a moment before telling me, "Sweetheart, Travis died before you were born." I felt my stomach twist. She went on. "He was about your age when it happened. He and his parents went missing on a road trip. They were last seen heading into the Appalachian woods. Their car was found months later, abandoned, but they were never found." My head was spinning. I hung up, opened my laptop, and started searching. I couldn't find Travis's house anywhere online, but I did find something else, a news article from 1993. It had a photo. My blood ran cold. It was the same house. The article detailed how it was once owned by a couple, Gerald and Lillian Braden, who went missing with their son, Travis. Neighbors reported strange noises, weird lights, and eventually an overpowering smell coming from the property. When police searched it, they found symbols carved into the walls, mutilated animal bones in the basement, and a sealed door covered in chains. They ruled it a possible cult-related disappearance. But here's the part that really messed me up. One of the photos in the article showed the inside of the house, that exact dining room, same wallpaper, same chandelier, even the same UNO cards on the table. I never went back. I never told anyone else. But sometimes, late at night, my phone rings. I don't answer anymore. It always says no caller ID, but when I check my voicemail, it's always the same thing. Heavy breathing. And then a voice, faint and echoing. "You shouldn't have left."